I love Souls games and Souls-like games. Nothing too crazy out of the gate I know, but I was looking for a new game to scratch that Souls itch and I came across Steelrising, a game set in Paris in the late 1700s where the French Revolution has been overrun by a mechanical army and it's basically our job to play clean up and save the day. Just quickly, if you do like this type of review-based content, consider subscribing and leaving a comment for more games for me to review. It helps me out massively. Also, a quick disclaimer, I did not play or even buy the DLC for this review, so if you're looking for that, you won't find it here. That's all, back to the video. Firstly, let's talk about the world here. I found that the areas are quite vast and have plenty of items to collect, even if the items in question weren't the most helpful, or at least early on anyway. There is a nice blend of vertical environments and traversal, which was a nice change from the typical Souls-like experience where you're largely following a path from A to B. I thought that the change in environmental design immediately separates it from other games in the genre. What I also thought was a neat touch was that as you progress the game, you can revisit previous areas and discover new parts within them, which were previously inaccessible using a grappling hook or through parkour. I felt that the world, while very cool in design, felt lackluster. It's such a unique concept with regards to the Souls-like genre, but the way it blended together just takes all the focus away from the world and into the combat and conflict between parties. Story-wise, I think it's rather simple. Basically, the king went a little crazy, being influenced by someone close to him, had a power trip, decided to unleash an army of mechanical soldiers, they fuck shit up, and we're there to solve the problem of these crazy machines that kill humans. The story also portrays a strong theme of skepticism, naturally given that machines are killing humans throughout the story. There are elements of betrayal, conflict, and shock, along with also having vague religious themes as well, at least narratively, as some of the cutscenes do show stuff like the Bible, which would have been quite prevalent at the time. I actually decided to look up the change in religious beliefs during this time period, and the game kind of reflects it well. During the French Revolution, France moved from official Catholicism to radical de-Christianization, ultimately having Catholicism brought back as a majority religion, while also recognizing Protestants and Jews. And before you ask, I'm not religious or a history nerd, I found this out from Google. So I guess in that sense, the developers actually made the story thematically accurate. Obviously the whole thing with machines being so advanced and killing people isn't, but it's cool to see as some other games can be wide of the mark, although the actual depth of the story is a little simple as it pretty much just stays in line with the major narrative point of the machine stuff with a sprinkling of other more interesting plot points. I mean, there's even a side quest that involves ending slavery in Paris, which I thought was really cool and well executed, but it has no relevance to the main story. However, a lot of Souls-like games aren't overly story rich, we play them for the combat. And thankfully, the combat on display in this game is quite good. It's not at the standard of FromSoft games or even games like Lies of P, Stellar Blade or AI Limit, but the game is good enough to where there are a multitude of weapons to use, multiple classes a player can choose from, along with a nice leveling system which I thought increased in price somewhat steeply, that or the enemies barely dropped any actual spirits, which is the currency in this game. Rest points have shops where you can buy consumables, weapons and modules, which I guess are like augmentations that intrinsically change the stats of your character. The pacing of fights is fast, with dodging being reminiscent of Bloodborne instead of your traditional sort of role. This admittedly took me a moment to adjust to, as I haven't played Bloodborne before and probably won't get the chance to. Thanks, Sony. But it clicked quite quickly, and there's a parry mechanic, although it's not an outright feature, rather a weapon ability that's only available on some weapons, and you can't reassign weapon abilities to other weapons, so there's not that much customization options, meaning that the game pushes the player to play aggressively, relying on close quarters combat and dodging as the primary fighting mechanics instead of having parrying be a main mechanic, just after I perfected parrying in Sekiro and Stellar Blade as well. Oh well. I always enjoyed exploring all the means of fighting in these games, so I just took it in my stride. Something that becomes immediately apparent in this game is that dodging has to be precise and movements have to be clean. The hitbox on enemy weapons is honestly somewhat questionable, though many times where I could visibly see that an enemy did not hit me, whether it was due to my placement or me dodging, and the game registered it as a hit, which was a little frustrating. Given that other games are so precise with their hitboxes, I thought it was a little disappointing, but this also makes you play smarter, so I don't really see it as a massive flaw, just a small observation and something that you adjust to in time. Enemy variety is just okay. A lot of enemies you face throughout the game are placed just to increase the challenge of the area, which I don't mind, but it begins to feel stale after finding out that most of the endgame is filled with the same enemies. For the most part, the only way you can actually differentiate some enemies is with their weapons, as some of them will have elemental imbued attacks which visually are very obvious. The bosses were well executed, with each boss offering something unique in both design and attack patterns. However, for the most part, they aren't very rewarding once defeated. Like, the only time you see something useful is for the first few bosses as you expand your arsenal. Outside of that, the rewards aren't anything groundbreaking. No boss weapons was a letdown, as I thought it could have been been a really interesting inclusion to further push the players to experiment and adjust their loadouts, as you can pretty much play through the entire game using one weapon if you really wanted to. Mini bosses I thought were okay, however some were very similar in design, especially early on. These enemies being thrown into the world to fill it out, I don't mind this as obviously the challenge needs to increase as you get better gear and become stronger, but for me it takes out the importance of that initial fight if I learn that something becomes a filler enemy later on. What makes this encounter so unique, you know? A name change? Like, the game doesn't really push you to understand the placement of these mini bosses, and the second it ends you just move on and get a quick reward for doing so. Now, I know the purpose of a mini boss is to act as a way of testing the player with new mechanics along the way to a boss fight, but Elden Ring does this fantastically, especially with dungeon bosses which are optional, but a lot of them have contextual relevance to where they are, whereas here I felt that somewhat out of place and without a reason as to really care about the fight. Additionally, there are a few quests in the game which I think are okay. They're largely just travelling to and from places, interacting with an item and going back to the character for more dialogue. There aren't really many rewards a player gets for doing this, it's more about expanding the story of the world, and I just wish that there were more incentive for these quests. If I have to go through all these different places and my reward is just dialogue, I think that's underwhelming, especially considering that the quests have minimal impact on the main narrative story. So, is it actually worth doing these side quests? I'm still not sure. I did them just because the completionist in me wanted to cover everything the base game had to offer for this video. As mentioned at the start of the video, I did not buy the DLC just because I wasn't sure how the gameplay would pan out, but the game largely ties itself up in the base game anyway, apart from one narrative thread, so maybe if I'm really bored then I guess I'll go and pick it up and finish it off. I thought I'd close off my thoughts of the game immediately after completing my initial playthrough, so anything from here on out is fresh off the dome basically. I thought the sound design was okay, nothing special, nothing that really stands out, but my one issue, and it's quite noticeable compared to everything else, was that your character Aegis has a really quiet voice for like 2/3 of the entire game, and I just found it to be really awkward. It's clear that it was adjusted to fit the machine's style, but compared to other characters in conversation, it's like she's whispering the entire time, right until the final few pieces where for some unknown reason she actually speaks up, and maybe that's due to the emotions of the game nearing its peak, but I just couldn't really immerse myself to that extent. Additionally, the music in the game was missing for the most part, which is a real shame because there are actually some really well composed pieces. The main menu piece, the final boss fight, and the closing credits are all solid, and I just feel like the rest of the game would have greatly benefited from having anything to add any sort of ambience to the world. Performance wise, the game literally stuttered once. I saw a lot of people complaining about optimization, which I think can still be further improved, but I don't think it was as bad as what others made it out to be, but that could just be lucky old me. Visually the game is fine, there's nothing spectacular, but some of the facial details and characters was weird, and just between us, the hairline was so sharply cut off you could tell that the character models needed just a little bit extra in the oven, and I think they would have come out really well. So, my closing thoughts. I think the game is good. I think the boss fights definitely make the game. The way the cutscene based storytelling was blended into Souls-like gameplay was an interesting approach, but it lacked that bit of polish, as sometimes it would contrast or you'd be really absorbed in the combat and then you'd have to watch a cutscene that really has no mean of gripping the player and keeping them engaged. So I thought that was a little disappointing, but overall if you want a Souls-like game to play, I think this is toward the mid to low high end of these sort of games. It's not perfect, but it does a lot well, and for that I think I would recommend playing this game. As always, if you'd like, please consider subscribing or giving me more game recommendations. Thank you all for your time. I know this video may have dragged ever so slightly, and given that it's quite close to the end of the year, there's always a chance that I might not get another video out for you guys, so who knows, this might be the last time I upload this year, maybe not. Take care and hopefully I'll see you around.